Everyone. Happy you're here. Happy you're here. We are going to be recording today's session. So as you come in, you'll notice a little message, but yes, we'll be recording. As we were letting folks in, I know that you maybe heard some music playing, and that was Another Day in Paradise. It was being performed by the Philharmonic Orchestra. But a true story to that really quick is that it was written by Phil Collins. And when he wrote this song, he was on his way to a performance at the Capitol when he noticed two young people that were living in cardboard boxes, providing really little to no protection as it was winter. And he recognized that these two young people living there on the street were a rock's throw from the Capitol building. So he wrote this song as an invitation to pause and really think about what we can do, both big and small, in our own communities to advocate for youth. And that really starts with ensuring a roof over their head, a roof that's safe and sustainable. So I encourage us today in this space to just find a spot for pause and reflection on what we can do in our own communities, both big and small, to advocate and really work to support young people experiencing homelessness. So with that, welcome to Mentor Minnesota's Lunch and Learn today. I'm so happy that you're here with us. Really, the goal of these events are to generate an informal space, allowing you to walk away with some on-the-ground resources, tools, and supports, and also information to really help infuse programs that are out there on the ground, mentoring programs, in tandem with providing some connection and conversation with each other. Our agenda for this next hour, starting from a good place, and that's really in getting to know you, introduce you to Mentor Minnesota and provide you with some foundational knowledge and resources. And then perhaps what I'm most excited about today is to hear from our guests, two community champions really in providing support, resources, and uplifting young people and their families that are experiencing homelessness. And that's Charlotte Kinzley from the Minneapolis Public Schools and Mary Sue Hansen from the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative. And then at the end, there'll be a space for some question and answer and a space for conversation. So starting from a place, we feel that it's important to try to start right off the bat and getting to know you. So in the chat, if you'd share your name, your pronouns, the organization, agency, and program that you're joining us, and in really the spirit of winter and our recent blanket of snow, we might find an opportunity to do some extra reading. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about a book that you really love. Maybe it was a children's book when you read that when you were young, or something you're reading right now, but we'd love for you to share that in the chat, and just a way to kind of get to know each other a little bit. And as you do that, we're going to introduce you to the Mentor Minnesota team, and I'll hand the mic over to Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I hope you're all having a wonderful lunchtime and enjoying some good food. So my name is Sarah Schaefer. I'm the Executive Director of Mentor Minnesota. We're really honored to have all of you joining us to discuss this really important issue, especially as we're coming into winter, which can be a lot harder for our young people and their families. I think for me, when I'm seeing some really good books here in the chat, including Pedagogy of the Oppressed, that is a must read. I agree with you, Mary Sue Hansen. And Fault in Our Stars is also a lovely book. It's a sad book, but it's a great one. And a book that I am currently reading is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, which is a modern sci-fi book about cities, which I think I'm sure there's some thematic overlaps in what we're going to discuss today, but that's by me. I love reading, so I'm going to take all these book recommendations and put them on my Goodreads list. So I will pass it on to Allie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Allie Ervig, she, her. I need to update my title in the slideshow, I guess. The Marketing and Development Manager. And for just taking a glance at my books. I'm gonna say The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. That was just a really cool. I love books that have like several generations in them. So yeah, that was a good one. I'll send it back to Emily.
Awesome. And continue to go ahead and share in the chat, you know, who you are, your pronouns, again, what organization or agency you're joining us from, and your favorite book. With that, I'm Emily Geray, use she, her pronouns. I'm the program director here at Mentor Minnesota. One of my very favorite books is Rules by Cynthia Lord. It's a story about a brother and a sister experiencing a lot of challenges that come with autism spectrum disorder. And I think part of why I love it so much is in the story, it highlights young people's really inherent ability to solve problems in a compassionate and really thoughtful way. And really, that's what I hope we can do here today. And really what brought me to this work is, you know, really advocating and wanting to uplift young people and youth voice and everything that I do. So again, thank you all for being here and continue to go ahead and share in the chat. So Mentor Minnesota, who are we? Really our pillars of work. And in a nutshell, we fuel the quality and quantity of developmental relationships for young people. So if at school, the workplace, out in communities, and really all of these different pillars of work, from elevating quality, engaging local leadership, expanding the movement, and influencing systems, really comes down that we want to support you. And that's the program leaders, community advocates, and really uplifting and investing in the power of relationships for young people. And how do we do this work? Through several different kind of buckets of work, if you will. One is training. We provide trainings that provide evidence-based practices for programs, both new and also infusing and uplifting the programs that are continuing to want to receive training. We also provide resources. We believe in empirical research. And so we really want to provide all of you with data-driven resources and data-driven content. Also, we provide workshops and cohort learning opportunities, really providing spaces for all of us to learn together. And also, we are technical assistance providers through the National Mentoring Resource Center and provide programs and opportunity to take an opportunity to receive one-on-one consulting with one of our TA providers. And a bit later too, when it comes to the National Mentoring Resource Center, they do a tremendous job of providing resources for programs. So with that, I'd love to kind of level set a little bit in some foundational knowledge when it comes to homelessness here in Minnesota. On any given night here in Minnesota, and I'm kind of thinking we're experiencing a little bit of a warm up, but as we're facing winter, as Sarah mentioned earlier, on any given night in Minnesota, 6,000 youth are experiencing homelessness. And so with that powerful piece of data, I really kind of wanted to level set with some of this terminology when it comes to how we're talking about young people that are experiencing homelessness. So absolute homelessness, that's sleeping rough. So that's using public, private shelters, residing in the street, public places. Concealed homelessness is homeless, but maybe temporarily housed with family or friends. So that might include couch hopping or reconciling with family and then staying elsewhere and kind of bouncing back and forth. Something else to notice or note here with concealed homelessness is that harmful youth work can also conceal or hide homelessness, as it provides kind of a bump in the system and, you know, being able to really track young people and know where they're at. There's also the at-risk of homelessness population, and that's really those individuals that are at risk of losing shelter, whether it be eviction, perhaps they're aging out of foster care, or some of those other situations where there's not necessarily any sort of transitional support, and soon they're their home situation is going to be changing. And I also kind of want to note too, I think it's important that when we're talking about exact numbers, it's often really hard to nail down, exactly, because in many cases, young people are concerned about involvement with public safety nets and systems. And really that's for fear of losing their independence, being afraid of it impacting their education, or another big one is they're concerned or worried about the result in accessing some of these services for the result of legal or other sanctions on their families. And so often young people may actively avoid detection and pass like some of their peers, even though the reality for them is that they are homeless. So every 3 years, Wilder Foundation does a research survey that really conducts a statewide survey that checks on or looks at the data when it comes to prevalence and homelessness, the causes, and really the effects of homelessness. But due to the pandemic, they've pushed the statewide study out to 2022. And I'm not going to go over all of these in great detail, as I am excited to hand the mic over to our guests here shortly. But I just encourage you to kind of just take a minute to pause and look at some of these data points when it comes to Wilder and what they found in their survey. And then if you want, you can share in the chat something that maybe surprises you or stands out to you, or if it's just something that you weren't aware of before, and we can talk about it a little bit, or if you have questions about it at the end, which also brings me to something that I forgot to mention. If at any point you have questions, we will provide a space at the end, but go ahead and pop your questions in the chat. And I've got Sarah and Allie here to help me kind of navigate, as I can't always see the chat while I'm talking, but then we'll make sure that we address any questions towards the end too. But feel free to pop your questions in the chat. I will just mention before we go on to, and go ahead and keep sharing, that I feel like it's really important to recognize too, that if you see ACEs and the impact that ACEs or adverse childhood experiences has on youth homelessness, I think those statistics are staggering, that 9 out of 10, so 90% of youth experiencing homelessness have experienced one, and often cases, multiple adverse childhood experiences, including abuse and harm. So, and also noticing the correlation between mental health needs and displacement are very high. And how many are parents? I would agree with that. That when they're taking this survey, if you have 26% or a quarter of these young people taking this survey, and a quarter of them have a child with them at the time. So just kind of imagine all the things that they're navigating all at one time. So is homelessness an urban challenge? Is it just something that we see here in the Twin Cities? And I think many of us would know the answer to that, that's no, a no. This is really a statewide issue. It impacts rural, suburban, urban, and tribal communities across the state. I will note that people experiencing homelessness in rural communities, it's a little bit harder to track the numbers with that or they can be undercounted simply because of the lack of homelessness services and shelters being provided. And if you're looking at the actual, over the course of all of it, 53% of homelessness are in urban areas. And then it's kind of split about a quarter in suburban areas and about a quarter in rural areas. I will mention that a fourth or a quarter of the rural homelessness are people of Indigenous communities. And so those numbers correlate with also the population of the homeless youth. And so I think as we're thinking about a lot of these issues and how to best address them, I would mention maybe a consideration too is how we can really amplify and uplift and be an ally for Indigenous communities when it comes to equitable funding on both, local and state level, and really, again, keeping the conversation going on how we can support both urban and rural communities that are experiencing homelessness for young people. So as we noticed with the Wilder research and some of those big statistic numbers, homelessness is statewide. So children and young people under the age of 24 are most likely to be homeless in Minnesota. Some of the reasons or why is this happening? Many of us know some of these too, but some may be new information. So really a lack of affordable housing, lack of employment, chronic health conditions that impede housing retention, and that might be for both the caregivers and or the young person, domestic abuse and violence, including those ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, racism and other system inequities. So all really big areas of why this continues to happen. So where do services fit in? Where, that's why we're here today to kind of talk about these intersections and how we can best support. And there's a few different areas that the intersections can take place. And so implementing culturally humble community coordinated approaches. So really collectively, as we're all here today, we're all working together and thinking and addressing on how we can best support, advocating for expanded housing opportunities, focusing and infusing some on-the-ground supports for those vulnerable. So that's especially those young people and those marginalized communities. And then also creating effective crisis response systems. So really uplifting collaboration and also allowing for youth voice to be in on that conversation. And this big wheel, so where does mentoring fit in? We may be a little bit biased in knowing how powerful mentoring can be, but really mentoring fits in everywhere. When it comes to all these different areas, the National Mentoring Resource Center found that the value of adding mentoring in the continuum of all the other services provided for young people experiencing homelessness, mentoring was really seen as a promising intervention. If that's educational supports, as we're going to hear from Charlotte Kinzley here in a minute from the Minneapolis Public Schools, and understanding the power of meaningful relationships at school. If that's community resources, as we're going to hear from Mary Sue from the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative, mentors can be those connectors and those power of community supports. We also have some folks, I believe, from Elpis and Sundance Family Foundation and maybe Wildflower Coffee, all really wonderful organizations here in the Twin Cities that believe in workforce pathways and the power of building these supportive relationships for young people. So with that and understanding how kind of the big circle and the importance of all of us coming together today, I'm going to kick it over to our special guest today. First, we're going to hear from Charlotte Kinzley. Charlotte, I'm so excited that you're here today. Charlotte is the homeless, highly mobile manager for the Minneapolis Public Schools. She supports students and families experiencing homelessness. And over the past 20 years, she's developed programs and initiatives in family shelters. Her focus really being on supporting the development of young people and advocating for stable housing. We also have Mary Sue Hansen here, who is the director of the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative. Before becoming director at SRFC, she practiced social work for about a decade, received her master's in management administration, and over the past 35 years has been working in human services. The SRFC exists to really serve children, youth, and their families in systems that they rely on for health, learning, safety, and security. And I love this and wanted to note that everything they do at Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative is starting with the question, how are the children? So again, we're excited to have both of you here, and I'm going to kick it back to Charlotte.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. As Emily said, I now work for Minneapolis Public Schools as the Homeless Highly Mobile Manager. I got connected to Mentor Minnesota through my work at Simpson Housing. And just before I jump in, just want to share how grateful I am to Mentor Minnesota for everything I learned in working with them. And they really helped support the development of a couple different mentoring programs that Simpson Housing now provides. So really grateful to you all for your work. I'm going to share my screen here. Give me a second. All right. Are you all seeing my screen here?
Yep, it just says it's loading. Yep, there it is.
Oh.
Perfect.
Okay, great. I'm actually going to turn my camera off too, because I'm having a little bit of bandwidth issues here. One second. Okay, Emily, I'm going to actually ask, or Sarah or somebody, if I get choppy, can you jump in? Because today has been a little touchy with bandwidth and I can't see you all. So
For sure. Yep.
Absolutely.
okay.
You sound great right now, though.
Okay, fabulous.
Yep.
Okay, so so I'm going to talk a little bit today about sort of what we're seeing in Minneapolis Public Schools with students experiencing homelessness, but also specifically I'm going to talk about Stable Homes, Stable Schools, which is a really exciting partnership. One of the reasons I was actually really excited to move into this position, it's a school housing partnership that provides wraparound support. So I'll focus mostly on that. But to get us started, I do want to just share sort of what we're seeing in Minneapolis Public Schools. So Emily, I appreciated sort of the level setting of sort of what we're seeing across the state in Minnesota with homelessness. School districts count students experiencing homelessness differently. So we include students who are doubled up. And so it's this, any of you who work in this know it's kind of this like big argument debate about it. School districts saying like, when you count people who are in shelter or people who are literally on the street, you basically are counting however many shelter beds your community is able to provide, especially in a place like Minnesota, because really what we see mostly are students and families who are doubled up or couch hopping. That's the majority of what we see. So appreciate sort of that context. This is our count of students who are experiencing homelessness last school year. I'm just going to preface it with it's about 2/3 of what we would have expected. We were distance learning the majority of the year, and a lot of two things happened. I think we missed students that we didn't know were experiencing homelessness, and the eviction moratorium kept people from moving into homelessness. So I think both things happened last year, which is why we saw lower numbers. We're continuing to see lower numbers. Our family shelters in Hennepin County, at least, are we've never had space available in those shelters until now, and some of them they're at about half capacity. Mary's Place used to have, and Mary's Place services not just Hennepin, but you know the metro area. Mary's Place used to, it would be unheard of to have a room stay open for more than a night, and they've been like half to 2/3 full for over a year. So I do think the eviction moratorium is making a difference. I do think there's been some new protections put in place, like a 14-day wait period on an eviction, which might seem like, oh, of course you'd have 14 days, right? Warning before you file an eviction, but that is not the case in most places. And Minneapolis just passed that. So I think there's some really good and exciting things happening. And I hope that trend continues. It's still way too many kids though. I mean, look at these numbers, right? This is way too many students in a given year experiencing homelessness. Two things I'll point out are the disproportionality that's been mentioned already, particularly with Native American and African American students. So if you look in the bottom left here, this first column, HHM%, so that's the percent, the breakdown of our students experiencing homelessness and their race ethnicity. And then the second column here is MPS, so our district-wide. So you can see for our Black students, 68% of our homeless student population is Black, with only 36% of our district. So you see that overrepresentation long history of racist housing practices that got us to this place very intentionally. Could do a whole session on that. But we're seeing today exactly what we would expect to see based on the practices and policies that we've had for decades. I'm gonna keep moving here. So I'm gonna switch and talk a bit about stable homes, stable schools. So really excited to have this initiative at Minneapolis Public Schools. 17 of our elementary schools with the highest rates of homelessness participate. And I'm not going to go through these, but I'm just going to point out, actually specifically this last column, the percent HHM anytime. So when we track students experiencing homelessness, we often talk about the number of students in a given year in that school that experience homelessness. This percent HHM anytime means the percent of the student body at, so for this first column, Anderson, have experienced homelessness at some point during their time in Minneapolis Public Schools. So for Anderson, 50% of their student body had an experience of homelessness during their time at MPS. So just to give you a concept of how prevalent this is for students, and due to a complete lack of affordable housing for our low-income families. So Stable Home, Stable Schools has two parts to it. One is rental assistance. So that is 3 years of wraparound support and rental assistance. So families pay 30 to 40% of their income on their rent. The rest of the rent is covered by the initiative. It's for families who are currently homeless. And for this, we can't meet the need of all of the families that are eligible. So we have to prioritize who we refer to this program. The way we prioritize is we look at academic need and history of homelessness. So, and the number of students at that school. So we've tried to do as much of making it like more of an assessment tool. So we aren't just referring whoever comes in that day, trying to be really strategic about who we're referring. I wish we didn't have to prioritize. I feel like housing should be a right, but we are very far from that place as a community. So we take all the kindergarten through second grade students at that school that are experiencing homelessness. We look at how they're doing. Like, are they attending school regularly? Is the parent able to engage? How is behavior at school? How are they doing academically? What's the history of homelessness? And any of those things that sort of like, if they're really not able to attend regularly, they're going to score higher than maybe another student who is able to attend regularly, even in the midst of experiencing homelessness. One thing I'll point out about this that I think has been really helpful for us to see is back to that definition of homelessness. The way our community releases housing, like homeless specific housing, is through our coordinated entry, which is great. Coordinated entry is a really important process to prioritize families for housing. But our doubled up families are not included in that because they're not considered actually homeless. So one thing that I think is really interesting about what we're seeing here is that only 32% of the students that we prioritize, or the families that we prioritized as most in need of housing support based on how they're doing at school and their history of homelessness, would be eligible for housing through our coordinated entry system. So we're screening out some of our most vulnerable families for housing assistance. The second part of Stable Home, Stable Schools is our housing stability initiative. So this is one-time assistance. We actually expanded during COVID to be 2 times, but it's a chunk of funds and or support that would either prevent homelessness or would help someone move into housing that they can then afford on their own. So these schools can refer anytime to this. We have not hit capacity on this, in part because the community has so many more resources right now. So we're with Rent Help MN, hopefully, if Rent Help MN is a statewide bucket of funds to prevent eviction, and we've never had this much money available to people. So if people are facing eviction for non-payment of rent, they're still protected through June of next year, as long as they've applied for Rent Help MN. So Rent Help MN is sort of covering a lot of what we would maybe have been covering through Stable Home, Stable Schools because of the pandemic and the extra resources that people were needing. So I'm going to shift a little bit, and so Stable Home, Stable Schools is available to those 17 sites with the highest rates of homelessness. We also have a lot of other supports at MPS. The school social workers coordinate that. I'll share this deck too with you all so you can access the link. But we have staff that regularly are connecting students with school. We do provide on-demand cabs. So as you can imagine, while kids are waiting, when they move regularly, they're waiting for a bus to get routed. We have on-demand cabs that can fill the gap for that. And we also have funds for the other sites that are not stable home, stable school sites, funds for homelessness prevention or housing stability, things to make sure that students can engage. I mean, it's really important, not just that they can show up at school with a backpack and supplies and those kinds of things, but also that they can be on a sports team, that they can take a dance class or do something after school. So we do have funds available to try to remove some of those barriers. Even with that support though, as you can imagine, homelessness really just impacts students in a dramatic way. It is so hard to be your best self in class when you aren't sure where you're going to go that night or when you've been moving around a lot. We had a high school student just recently who she's been living on her own since 15. She now has her own apartment. She has straight A's. She attends every day. Like, I do not know how this student does it. She is absolutely amazing. But she was short on her rent because she had lost her job. She had found another one, but there was this gap. And so we were able to tap into some of these funds. But the caseworker that helped her do that saw her right after this was happening. And the first thing she said is like, oh my gosh, I can actually pay attention in English class. Like, when that's weighing on you, when you're not sure what's going to happen, if you're going to get kicked out or where you're going to go, there's no way you can take in what's happening in the classroom. And so really grateful to have those funds, but also recognize that there's a lot of students that we aren't able to fix that problem, right? We aren't able to take that stress away, and it definitely impacts their ability to learn in the classroom. I also just put on here, and I'll share this too, just in case if you need to connect with anyone in Minneapolis Public Schools. This is our team here. I have a really amazing team of people that really work hard to connect students. And really our goal is to remove the barriers so that students can fully participate in their education, with the long-term goal that we don't need that anymore, right? That we do provide housing for all of the young people in our community so that we don't have to constantly be removing these barriers, and they can really just be a part of the community, not have to move around all the time, and have school stability because they have housing stability. So I will stop there and pass it over to you, Mary Sue, unless there are anything that I need to talk about in the chat or anything first.
There's one question maybe, and then we can hand it over to Mary Sue, but Amy's wondering, do you help these youth find jobs? Is that part of your efforts?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree. I think maybe our role as a school district is more making sure they're connected to community resources that might be doing that. We do have programs, and we're building out like exploratory pathways through the school district where youth can be earning credits through employment. So more through external partners, I would say, in terms of finding jobs.
Okay, great.
I saw Peg's question about diligent parents potentially being penalized for sending their children to school, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts or comments on that, Charlotte, or if Peg, you wanted to enumerate on that at all.
Peg, do you mean when I was talking about the prioritization around attendance for the rental assistance?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, the opposite is true. So, oh, I see what you're saying. So a parent who is diligent. Yeah, I see what you're saying. We look at it more as the capacity. I mean, because the way homelessness plays out looks really different for different families. And so if families are in a place where attendance can be maintained regularly, that's awesome. That's great. And so no, we're not penalizing them, but it becomes part of a risk, right? Like we're looking at who do we really need to catch, or it's just going to be really hard on this student. So I see what you're saying, but it's more, we're looking at it more as like a risk and a need to prioritize for who is not going to be able to make it if we do not support them. So that's how we think of it.
All
I've
right.
really been, I've been apprised lately of the legal impediments to people who are renters in inviting youth or homeless youth into their house and not jeopardizing their leases or adding, I mean, it's a huge problem, and we don't have enough shelters, and the community needs to step it up, but yet if they do so, they're jeopardizing their own health. Do you have any comments on that? Is there any legislation or, any
Just-
movement legally?
And just that I totally agree with you that like we're really, I mean, you look at how homelessness plays out, it's mostly doubled up in couch hopping, which is absolutely putting, and it's often renters who are letting other people into their home. And so they're jeopardizing their own lease or their own situation. And so in a way, we're just like asking the community to solve the problem of homelessness. And it's not right. I mean, it needs to be policy, funding, at a federal, at a state, and at a local level, if we're going to move the dial. And it should not be on the backs of friends and relatives to fix this humongous problem that we've created.
Yeah.
And I see Mary Sue wrote in that Micah and Isaiah are two great community organizations that are working on those policy changes, which is great. I agree that putting this on a young person's network, which might already be taxed in many other ways, poses a lot of challenges, and it shouldn't be on them. I think if you're interested and you identify as LGBTQIA, there's a great program through Avenues for Youth, which is called Connect Host Home Program, which provides an opportunity for folks from the same community to host young people throughout the winter. Mostly it's a winter program for youth experiencing homelessness.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Sarah. And I did pop a couple. I'll be sharing out resources both statewide and beyond for folks kind of that you could pick on your region, for folks that are maybe further out state Minnesota or those in the Twin Cities, in different ways that we can, amplify the voice and really, hopefully, as you said, Peg, have both at community and then state level and all of these levels work together and pull in the same direction. But there's a couple different ways that folks can get connected and hopefully amplify by speaking to some legislators. But I'll make sure to share that at the end too. So, but Mary Sue, the floor is yours. So thanks, Charlotte.
All right. Thanks, Charlotte. So I'm just going to share our website and kind of talk a story through with you guys. I think it's easier for me to do that than to give you a PowerPoint, because our collaborative's been around since 1998. I've been their director that whole time. So I've got about 23 years of experience in working with issues around children, youth, and families experiencing at-risk circumstances around the areas of their health, learning, safety, and security. And we too really struggled with coordinated access and the HUD guidelines not being so restrictive. And so we created a basic needs practitioner team that really looked at prevention of homelessness or those youth and families who are precariously housed. And when the pandemic hit, we were really meeting monthly with our practitioners. We moved to weekly meetings. And we are also working at the time with workforce services on a group called YouthWorks. Many of our partners are here on this call. And YouthWorks really talks about that intersection between, learn, earn, and lead opportunities and the power of multiple wage earners to really help people break free from poverty. So oftentimes I intersect the work I'm doing with YouthWorks with the work I'm doing with homeless prevention. So I'm just going to bring you to our website. It's called houseless. And on it, whenever I go to a meeting and I have all these teams, Heading Home, Suburban Ramsey, Basic Needs practitioner group that meets weekly, community resource navigators that work in all 4 school districts. So we work with all 4 school districts, 57 schools in Suburban Ramsey County with all the county providers, with faith communities, parents, youth. We have youth, cultural healers and elders on our board. And we have a youth works team. We have a school linked mental health team and a crisis response team. But I'll talk more about that. But when you go to our homepage, anything I learned from those teams regarding resources, I put in a resource directory, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But that started when the pandemic hit. And I think one of the things I want you to know is that we try to keep, as a family service collaborative, we try to keep every one of our partners who are practitioners up to date, as much as we're up to date on any new resources that might help children, youth, and families. So one of the resources that we have right away is our basic needs resource directory. It's a simple Google Doc, but it has 1,700 unique viewers that have used it so far since the pandemic hit. There's over, I think, 70 pages right now, but we try to keep it updated every single day. And that's, on this side is all of the kind of the table of contents. But a lot of our practitioners go in and they do like a control F and do a find, kind of a keyword search find, and they're able to find everything pretty much that they're looking for. The other thing that we do is the peer-to-peer mentoring. And that's why I really value the philosophy and culture of Mentor Minnesota, because I think peer-to-peer mentoring is super powerful. So when our practitioners are working on a complex case and they've hit a wall, we promise them that we'll build a rapid response team around them. And I'll connect them to the right practitioners to help them formulate a plan to help the youth or family that they're working with. And that has been really powerful. We promise that we are going to be no barrier, low barrier as much as possible. We promise to support any ways to remove barriers of equity. And we're really there for each other. We just simply call it a buddy system. So all these practitioners who come together on a weekly basis are here for each other. So we really promote a culture of peer-to-peer mentoring. So that's one of the resource directories. But like I said, we also maintain a youth jobs and training resource directory. And that's in partnership with the Sundance Family Foundation, and Peg Thomas is the executive director of that wonderful organization. And what we do is we interface this, all these opportunities for youth who are living in toxic stress of homelessness, but to also help them get connected, like Charlotte was saying, to meaningful opportunities in their lives. And especially right now during the pandemic, there are a lot of meaningful virtual training opportunities where youth can get trained into job skills and can get really meaningful work right now too. And so we keep those resources up to date all the time on that resource directory. The other thing we do is commit to authentic community engagement. And so one of the things that I just absolutely love is that the Sundance Family Foundation, one of the biggest gaps for families and youth during COVID has been, reconnecting with meaningful work and with employers. And Sundance Family Foundation heard about that right away, and they created this thing called Zoomer Cammers. And every week on Friday at 11 a.m., we get online and meet with new employers who are second chance employers, who have jobs that are have meaningful training and apprenticeship opportunities, who are close to a bus line, who remove barriers, and then I often go to those meetings, take notes, and then I send those notes out to all of our partners, because I want them to start thinking not only, people, they're homeless, we just have to get them housed. It's not only that, we have to make sure they're not going to be evicted, keep them in their home first and foremost, make sure they're connected to meaningful jobs and training opportunities, make sure we're helping them not only look at stable housing, but the importance of having multiple wage earners, because it really is a powerful strategy to help them break free from poverty. So those are some of the things that we try to help people understand. And this Earn and Learn documentary, I mean, Peg should have her own time with your organization, but they kind of demystify the career pathways for youth and for adults. And I really love that we're trying to figure out how to communicate that college is not the only pathway for our young people. And there's so many other ways for them to have meaningful employment. If you want, you can always look through any of this about us, but I'm just going to bring you to our Heading Home Suburban Ramsey Basic Needs Practitioner Group. And in each of these teams, you'll find all the minutes from all our meetings. And just if you want to peruse that, it's kind of interesting. But one of the things we're doing too, Charlotte, is that our collaborative of partners with Solid Ground and with Lutheran Social Services, 3 years, almost 4 years ago, we applied for a Homework Starts with Home grant with MHFA. We got it. It was a targeted universalism grant. So we only target those who are disproportionately affected by homelessness in our communities. And so that's BIPOC families and LGBTQI identifying families. But I call it targeted universalism because once you build a program that serves those most in need, you can use those learnings to serve those all in need. So you can't really see this, but what started with Homework Starts with Home, now Solid Ground has Home to Stay, Home Again, and Home Safe, Home Front, and Day One. They have grown significantly in their supportive housing and homeless prevention programs as a result of the learnings from our Homework Starts with Home grant. And I'm happy to say that the Homework Starts with Home grant got renewed. We were one of 3 only in the state that got our second round of funding. So I'm really grateful for that. But if you look also into YouthWorks, you'll see here is our notes from every YouthWorks meeting. You're all welcome to come. We learn a lot together. I always call us a motley crew. We're kind of fun, we keep it loose, we keep it random, but those are our best conversations. And then in that, you'll see all our Zoomer camera notes as we go into learning about employers in the community. And Peg has a Zoomer camera catalog that lists everybody we've been meeting with and their phone numbers and how to connect with them. And it's just been really, truly just a beautiful resource. So I'm going to stop sharing. And the other things that I want to say is, you know, after our weekly meetings with YouthWorks and our Homework Starts or our Heading Home Suburban Ramsey groups, we also do some monthly gatherings. All of our people who are kind of generalists, community resource navigators, we get together and kind of go in depth and talk about, you know, important new resources in the community. And now I'm gathering our housing navigators because it's a new position, not for our Homework Starts with Home grant. We've been employing housing navigators for 4 years now. But more and more organizations are seeing the need for housing navigators to be in their agencies. I'm gathering them on a monthly basis too, because they're really helping each other. Again, it's a buddy system, a peer-to-peer mentoring system. So the last thing I'll say that I think has been really important is the importance of caring for our providers who are in really very stressful circumstances. One of the things I sometimes do on my weekly meetings is have cultural healers in the room, and they may do some cultural healing practices with us, or we might have someone do some yoga breathing with us or some mind-body work, just because when I woke up one morning after hearing we're in a pandemic, the first thing I thought of is we have to keep our collaborative whole. And I really feel like through all of this, we're holding each other up so we can hold up youth and families. And that's what's really important, is the more we can help each other, the more we can do right by our community. So I'll stop there. And if anybody has questions, I'm always willing to work with folks. Oh yeah, Pig. So yeah, the wealth we created because of all the learnings from people like Peg at the Sundance Family Foundation and our YouthWorks beautiful community of practitioners. We created this thing called the Financial Health and Wealth Creation Resource Fair. So our collaborative partners really closely with the Children's Mental Health Collaborative. And ever since the pandemic, we've been holding online resource fairs, and that we bring in practitioners and service providers to do breakout rooms. And any of our families can go visit those breakout rooms and learn about resources. Well, now we also have one called Financial Health and Wealth Creation, where we had like 13 breakout rooms of providers and services that talked about entrepreneurship, or how to navigate through resource job fairs, or high yield training opportunities that are out there, or second chance employers, or how to utilize your career counselor in high school. So we had all these cool topics. And if anybody wants that, I can share that all with you too. We had about 90 folks show up for the first one. This was very new for our community. And like Peg always said, 90 stayed. We had prizes at the end, and it was just really a really great experience. And we're going to do it, probably keep having those happen every other month, because I do feel one way to break through the system and change the system is to really help people find their career pathway and make sure they have access to those exciting resources. So that's about what we're doing.
You're awesome, Mary Sue. We're so lucky that you're here today and part of this conversation. And Charlotte, you're equally as amazing. And Minneapolis Public Schools is lucky to have you. And not just Minneapolis Public Schools, but I think the Minnesota community is a better place because you're in it. Like, there's no such thing as other people's children. And that's so true. We have to work collectively and think holistically about young people, because if one young person thrives, we all thrive. So, and I'm thrilled that Peg Thomas is here from Sundance. And I know Marianne is here from Elpis, and just really incredible people to be at the table to talk about this today. So I could not be more humbled by all of you being here, and more excited to continue to work together. So, but yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute or pop it in the chat. And maybe while folks are doing that, I am being mindful of time too. I'm just going to pop up a couple of things that I'll share out here at the end.
Well, I'm the recipient of way more information or attention than I deserve, because I think Mary Sue is the hub of all of our collaborations. You are just extraordinary, and just finding people who can help with pets for the homeless, and the shots and the food and the things that they need, or secondary supply shelters. I mean, man, Mary Sue knows everybody and everything. And there should be a Mary Sue in like every single county. The thing
that
yeah, the thing that we don't realize, and I never realized until talking to you, is you're part of a system, a statewide system of coordinated services, and of which no one can compare to you. But do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Me, Peg?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're part of the family service collaboratives, and there's family service collaboratives throughout all of the state, as well as children's mental health collaboratives and integrated collaboratives, where some of the counties integrate and it become both a family service collaborative and a children's mental health collaborative. But when you've seen one collaborative, you've seen one collaborative, because they all are very, very different and operate very uniquely. But I feel like our collaborative has had the benefit of a really strong board who really has supported me as their director for 23 years. And we just have been given permission to do whatever it takes and to stay broad in our work. So health, learning, safety, and security, pre-birth to 21, and now working with families or youth 20 up to 24, 25. I mean, we're just there to be responsive to the community needs. And I have a board who really understands that that's how we address systems change, is stay flexible and responsive and complex and adaptive. That's kind of our mantra. And as we do that, we're able to address those gaps in the system, those emergent needs and those essential needs that that we see day in and day out. So thanks, Peg.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and so important. I think I love that you say you're not only collaborative, but you're flexible. And I think you're also very compassionate and inclusive. I love being in meetings with all of you because everyone is invited in to be part of the conversation. And I really feel like that's how we're going to best move forward in this in such a difficult time, as all these ripples of COVID and underlining conditions have really, caused these ripples. I think that's how we move forward, and that's being inclusive and compassionate for each other, taking care of ourselves and each other, all those things together. I know some folks need to pop off, but I'm happy to stay on a little longer as well. I will just mention, I will send out a wraparound with, there's a bunch of resources that were shared, not just in today, but that I've collected that I'll be sharing out with folks. And there's a couple here that I have, the Homes for All. That's a place that you can jump on there and uplift your voice and really supporting the efforts in creating more sustainable housing. There's also the True Colors United, another great resource for people to uplift voice and the importance of addressing these issues, because the emergency spending bill did not include assistance for those experiencing homelessness. So I think it's just something to be mindful of. But again, there's resources, really, we're lucky, are statewide, and I'll be sure to be sharing those out with folks. We really hope that you stay in touch. Don't be a stranger. We love to see your names and new people coming into our inbox and at our events. So please continue to know that we want you here. And also, if there's any program leaders that are interested in receiving some one-on-one time with a technical assistance provider, just a reminder that that we are, able to offer that for programs as well. So again, thank you all. A very special thank you to Charlotte and Mary Sue for your wisdom and your open and loving hearts that you have for this work, and how much you care about young people and their families. Again, I could not be more grateful for you.